serve it more.
We'll get the bottles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On fellowship expense.
Of course.
I don't think I could get away with that, I'm sorry.
You know, you can.
I can't. We don't put drinks on.
Oh, okay.
You probably could get it to be on PR expense.
Yeah, well, I see, I'm not given a card for that.
I know, you see, that's where you sort of position yourself and John's buying your drink.
Oh, yeah, well, this is what I'm thinking. I'll just slowly work my way up and then I'll be given my own card sooner or later.
You'll notice it become more and more generous as the evening goes on.
Yeah, the more as the drinks go down, the more I get. It'll be good, it'll be good. It's a bit warm in here though.
Actually, really?
I feel a bit like an air hostess. So, the exits are over here.
Don't stand in the middle of the alley.
Oh, today when we came on the plane, they've done this whole new...
The kind of background that we're working on
Yeah.
is actually having that between the two of you. So if you're kind of here, and the person you're talking to is where you were, so kind of this, should we put a little bit of tape on as well?
Yeah, let's put some tape on the floor and then put tape where I should be.
That way a little bit.
Me? Okay, this way. Stand a little bit this way.
This way.
Yeah, that's really good for you.
Okay, and then,
Do you want some?
yeah, put some tape on as well so I know where to sit with the mic. Just be easier so we know both where to stand. Are you ready for later? Okay, this is where you stand then, that's good. And then whoever you're interviewing stands. Am I good?
So whoever I'm interviewing stands there.
Yeah?
Excuse me, please. I'm trying to get that in the background.
Polio. And then,
Oh, I see. Okay, you do that.
and then where should I? I'm going to be down here.
Hey, could you stand on that for the yellow question?
You need to be specific.
Is this good? Or should I be closer? How close can I get?
The microphone's not above Criplin's bits. It doesn't really matter. So
Well, you're down here then in that case, aren't you? Yeah.
I can just sit on the floor here.
Yeah. Do you want a dry run then? No, I mean free. But I might be. You can do it.
Tell us about PPS Daily Forward.
No idea. We just made it up one day.
Why is it so important to have such a thing as PPS Day?
Someone said it was a good idea.
What are you hoping to achieve from today?
Hope to have a beer later on.
Really? Can I join you?
No.
Let's achieve it because it's so tough.
That's all cool, isn't it? I think we've done it once or twice before, haven't we, really?
PPS Day? I think it's our fourth one, isn't it?
I've spoken to a couple of people now, and they're saying how fantastic it is to bring it up north. Well, that's the whole point, isn't it?
We did last in 3 years ago. So that's right.
Huh?
is it recorded?
Why are we doing this? So we'll be recorded again today. We'll have to be careful what we say. We don't want to start talking about John or Lee.
No.
That'd be inappropriate.
Say it into the mic.
So, all the drinks are on John tonight.
Well, that's what he said.
Exactly.
He said he said the staff worked so hard. He wants this to be a pre-Christmas event.
Exactly.
And what he's going to do is put his hand deep into his pocket so that everyone has an opportunity to get
Plus, he wants the staff to be trained for drinking purposes for
to get up to speed for Christmas.
particularly there's new members of the team. Which might,
Yeah.
On the thing. Oh. So who do you want to interview first then?
This is probably where they're going to be standing. So this is probably the distance you're going to get.
drink of water. No, shadow on your face. No, shadow on your face. Oh, do you have a torch? I need the light from my phone. Okay.
Let me know when you're ready.
So, am I answering to him or am I answering to
You
that?
could,
It's like a
you
We're,
could,
we're
yeah.
talking, right? Okay.
Feel free to look at the camera. I think it is live streaming.
Thanks for that.
live stream of PPS Day 2017 at Holyrood in Edinburgh. First of all, I'm going to be speaking to Ted.
Even though,
This is Ted Hill, who doesn't know him, Chief Exec of the British Polio Fellowship. Ted, tell us about PPS Day and its origins.
obviously, World Polio Day is well known, and we wanted to do something in the UK to recognise PPS. And one of the things I wanted to have PPS Day. So we invented it about 4 years ago, and we ran it as a pilot initially in Winchester, which was the original capital of England. It seemed to work quite well there, and what we've done is actually go round from Parliament Building to Parliament Building. So we did obviously Westminster, we then went on to Wales, last year was Belfast, and this year in Holyrood. So the idea is to just create that atmosphere and understanding of PPS in the four nations.
Thank you. So, going on from that, why is it important to have a PPS Day? If you already have a World Polio Day, why is PPS distinctive?
Well, I think I'm probably preaching the converted, but as you know, there's 120,000 people in the UK alone who are survivors of polio, and the understanding of post-polio syndrome isn't that quite well known. For most people, it's something consigned to history books, it's something that people don't have to worry about anymore, so it's vital that actually raise the profile. Obviously amongst the policy makers, such as MSPs, MPs and the like, and also amongst the medical profession as well.
What in particular are you hoping to achieve from this year's event in Scotland?
Well, as I say, it's to bring that message north of the border. There's a great system here already, great networks with the Scottish members, and indeed from the Scottish Polio PPS group, and so it's just making that wider.
This is the first time we're actually live streaming post-polio PPS Day. Can you tell me why you think the charity is going down this route?
Well, you're right, Crippen. We're flirting with technology, and we're trying to do things which are smarter, more efficient, and cheaper, to be honest. And we're certainly aware that people are finding it more difficult to get out and about, so we're trying to bring the information to people in their homes. We also know that about 80% of people in the latest survey so they could access the internet. So this is clearly a great way to allow our members and others to come into our meetings. So not only our members, but as I say, policy makers and health professionals, and as I said, the international community. Hopefully this is going live abroad as well, so hopefully there's someone there sitting in their gym jams in Australia just getting up, watching this. We understand that there's an interest. We certainly know from the AGM which we live stream there is interest in Europe, so our colleagues in the European EPU are looking. So yeah, it is just making that awareness much greater.
I think it's recognised, particularly that Scotland is an important part of the fellowship. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely right. It's vital that all our members are represented and represented fairly and equally. And as I say, we've tried to take the message to each of the countries. Ireland last year, Wales the year before. So clearly, to raise that profile and give support to our Scottish members is vital. And it's great that we're actually here in the building. A number of MSPs are said they're going to join us later on in the evening to hear our message. So hopefully we'll get that hammered home.
Are there any plans for PPS in 2018?
Plans are being formulated. We've got a number of ideas. As I say, we've been around to each of the Parliament buildings, so we're currently trying to identify what's the best way to move forward. Now, is it to take it to Europe? Maybe, maybe not. Is it to actually take it back to our members and maybe concentrate some of our PPS days in the conurbations where there was outbreaks of polio 50, 60 years ago to raise the profile there? Or is it to actually try and raise our membership? Are we looking at areas where there's been immigration to the country, places like Leicester, Bradford and the like, where maybe we can actually recruit members from the communities that move there?
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
My absolute pleasure. See you later.
That was excellent. So, hoping you're really enjoying live streaming. I think it's important that we start looking towards 2018 and what we're going to be doing in the future with PPS Day. And we really need to keep beating the drum, keeping the message going, and we need to do it in various ways, through membership, locally, nationally and internationally. We're just waiting for somebody else to come along so we can speak to them. I'm just going to keep talking. It's really great to have this live streaming technology available to us. Thank you very much to the guys at Beyond PR for making this happen. There's people behind the camera, there's Rachel and Andy, who you can't see because they're behind the camera, and John's around taking photographs. Am I going to get David to come and talk to me?
Talking to you?
Hi. Hello, this is David Mitchell. People who don't know him, he's the National Chair of the British Polio Fellowship, re-elected again this September at the AGM. Thank you, David. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay. We are now pleased to be able to speak. Oh, sorry, I'll repeat myself there slightly. One of the other roles that David has is he's Vice Chair of the EPU, so we're excited about that as well. David, this is not your first time in Scotland, is it?
No, not at all. I love the country. I've visited all 7 Scottish cities and also been to some amazing places right at the top of Scotland. And of course, about 500 yards away from here, in 1970 and 1971, I ran the Carlton Hotel, which was a trust house in those days. So the area is very familiar, and I'm very glad to be back.
What do you make of Holyrood and having PPS Day in Scotland, and why do you think it's so important for the fellowship?
Well, we've done all the other 3 capitals, so it's fitting that we've come here. I've never been in this building before, so it's very special. And of course, Holyrood now is very, very well known. I would say if 15 years ago you'd asked somebody, does Scotland have an independent parliament, they wouldn't have known. So it's very important that we come here. Very important that we get the message across about post-polio syndrome, and to have it in such a setting for our members, who a lot of them, I've been talking to them, they've not been here before, so they're very proud, they're very interested, and they're very pleased that we've invited them.
Particularly for members watching on the live stream and internationally, why do you think it's a good use of the charity resources to have days like PPS Day?
Well, because polio is hardly known, despite wonderful efforts by everybody, and of course the new film that's come out, Breathe, which really is doing excellent business and has had great press all over the United Kingdom and certainly in America. But post-polio syndrome is unknown to people, so the more we can do to bring it to the attention of the press, the public and the medical profession, the better. And we're getting there gradually, but we're not a sexy disease, we're not an exciting disease, but my word, it can be a very debilitating disease for our members.
Actually preempted my next question, which is about Breathe. So I'm going to follow up that on and say, can you tell us a bit about Kinnaman in the Woods?
Well, yes, we're having, we're calling it a charity, it's showing of Breathe early December, and it's being held at a unique little cinema. It was a wartime cinema. It's built of wood. It's built in the style of a Swiss chalet, and it was really an RAF cinema. And it's in a spa town, very small. To other people it would be a village, and it's was the headquarters of the officers' mess for the famous 617 dam busters, and there's lots of memorials round about. We've already contacted other branches in the East Midlands. It's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so they can come and go in daylight, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I've been talking to the East Midlands chairman, Mick Harper, and he says that we hope that we're going to make it a very interesting and a different kind of event. I won't be singing, so that won't put people on.
It sounds really exciting, and I urge as many members as possible to go and watch the film Breathe if they can't get to Kinnaman, because it is a great film to have the privilege to watch it when David watched it.
It's a wonderful film, absolutely wonderful. And I was 22 when I had polio, nearly the same age as Robin Cavendish, and as I lay there, I thought, oh dear, you know, I don't really know much about this disease, but I can't move, difficulty breathing, So I could sympathise with him, and of course the pain, the absolute pain when you get polio is appalling. You cry out in the night because it was so bad.
I think it's really exciting, your new role with the EPU. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, it's taken me a bit by surprise. Number one, they all speak English, which is absolutely wonderful. All the documents and minutes and accounts, they're all in English, and euros, but they're wonderful. Again, there's 8 directors of the European Polio Union, as there's 8 trustees of the fellowship. They come from Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Slovakia, France, Belgium, Italy, Great Britain, Ireland, Spain, yeah, they're from all over. And we've now got 29 European countries who've signed up to be members of the EPU, and we've just put into place a structure whereby if they're a group starting off and they haven't got much funding, they can pay 50 euros, which is not too much in this day and age. And we've got a waiting list of people wanting to join. Every fortnight we have a telecom, which again has taken me by surprise. It's absolutely wonderful. It's as if the people are in the room and we get a terrific amount of business done. And again, it's trying to educate people about post-polio syndrome. Of course, we're all for eradication. That is being looked after by the World Health Authority, Rotary International, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and very, very much so because we started the ball rolling by the British Polio Fellowship.
Is there any other message you'd like to add?
To people who can't be here today, it's quite a celebrity occasion. We've got past chairmen here, we've got trustees, we've got our staff colleagues, and although, and I know you'll know from my articles in the bulletin, people think that we don't do too much. On our budget, for a small charity, I think we punch above our weight, and we're here to make sure that people, especially doctors, when somebody goes in and says, I'm not feeling very well, I think I've got post-polio syndrome, the doctor doesn't turn around and say rubbish anymore. The doctor will say, oh, now that's interesting, tell me all about it. We're coming to an age where social care is diminishing, loneliness is increasing, number of people housebound, but we can promise our members that we will do all we can for their welfare and their health and their happiness as well.
Thank you very much, David.
Okay, Doc.
Well, that was wonderful as well, wasn't it? I think we're really getting a flavour of PPS Day today, and I'd like to thank everybody I'm talking to. We're just waiting for the next person to come along. I'm really glad to say we've been able to live stream today. It means that we can get to a much wider audience. Have I lost my place?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Hello, Gwenda.
Hello, Pippi.
For those of you who don't know, this is Gwenda Cope. She's the National Vice Chair, elected as such in September at the AGM this year. This is her second year as trustee.
Yes.
And she'll be there now for at least another 2 years.
Yeah.
So, just a bit of background. Welcome to Edinburgh.
Thank you very much.
Do you have any connections or personal memories of these various systems?
Well, this is only my second visit to Edinburgh, but I must say I've been very fortunate. In both the visits we've had glorious weather. So, yes. But I'll tell you what, I noticed the difference now. I came a number of years ago, and now, and I didn't notice it then, but now I notice Edinburgh is a very steep city. There's a lot of ups and downs, steps, and getting from A to B is not always straightforward.
I presume there's a lot of cobbled streets as well, which
Yes.
don't help.
No, they certainly don't, and that's why it's good that it's been dry, because they're not slippery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just to give a bit of context, we've had glorious sunshine all day today, so it's been great weather in Edinburgh.
Yes.
Can you tell us about your relationship with polio? And do you have PPS?
Right. My relationship with polio is I had polio in the mid-50s. I think I was amongst the last of the epidemics. I subsequently had corrective surgery on it affected my leg, my right limb. I had surgery and I was very fortunate in that come 16, I was discharged by the NHS and the consultant said, effectively, right, that's it. We've done as much as we can. I was left with a slightly shorter leg, but that was it. So the next 40 odd years, fine. It was something I'd had in my past. And then about 10 years ago, I started to notice the fact that my leg was getting weaker and the symptoms have become more pronounced. I was having falls, I wasn't able to walk as well, and now I've got to use an ankle support and a walking stick to get round. And I don't have a formal diagnosis of PPS, but I do have all the typical symptoms of it in the weakness in that limb. Yeah.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey as trustee over the last couple of years and how that's changed your relationship possibly with other members, but also a bit more about the other roles you've taken on apart from the vice chairmanship within the trustee?
Right. How can I say? My family, my father was in the Royal Air Force and we moved around a lot. And I didn't know other people who had polio when I was a child or growing up. And during my, adult life, no, I didn't know anybody else who had polio. And it was only through a mutual friend I was introduced to a local head teacher who was a staunch supporter of the British Polio Fellowship, and she told me about it. So it was only 2 or 3 years ago that I learnt about the British Polio Fellowship. I joined. I phoned up Ted Hill, the chief exec, to see what I could do to help. And as I was retiring, he said, why don't you come and see the sort of work we do? And if you're interested, next year we're going to be having elections for trustees. And I was fortunate in, yes, I was elected a trustee 18 months ago, and now this September I was elected to be vice chair. And I think, what I want to do is there's a lot of people like me out there who had polio, thought it was something in their past, and now don't know, what's happening really. And they need, to be more aware of post-polio syndrome and the fact that the British Polio Fellowship is here to help them.
You're absolutely right. There's a vast number of people in the country who had polio in the past just do not know anything about PPS, and we will present symptoms eventually.
And the thing is, a lot of the medical profession have no direct experience of polio. And I know we're working to raise awareness amongst GPs and other professionals, but that's part of the role, is not just getting out to the potential members, but also to the professions who they've got to deal with.
I know you've taken on a couple of subcommittee roles for the trustees.
Yes. This year I've joined the finance committee. Yes, but I'm not a financial person. I spent my career in housing association development, but I think what the treasurer said was, I've got a good business approach to it, and that's what the charity's got to have now. It's got to be, almost like a business, to be cost effective, knowing what its aims are, what its goals are, what it can achieve, working within its budget.
Thank you very much, Gwen. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, so that just sort of highlights some of the issues facing us around awareness, and how important it is to continually be talking about PPS as much as possible. I encourage as many members to go out to the wider community and keep spreading the message in any way you can.
Sorry about walking.
That's all right.
Hi, Ruben.
Hi, Alex.
Here, do you want me to stand just this side or
on
that
those,
side?
that
Right, okay, thank you. Ta.
Cool. I have the pleasure to talk to Alex Neal now, who is an MSP, and he has very kindly sponsored today. So thank you very much, Alex.
Pleasure.
Can you tell us how you first heard about the British Polio Fellowship?
Well, it was really through a friend of mine who's also a constituent, Archie Layden, and his wife Pat. and he was opening up a shop to try and raise money for the fellowship and the network in Coatbridge, which is adjacent to my constituency in Airdrie. And Archie explained I'd never heard of post-polio syndrome until Archie did that, and that's probably now about 10 years ago, and that's how I first came to hear about it.
Absolutely. And so you just answered my next question is how did you get involved? So you just explained that as well. So
Well,
thank you.
also, when I was the Cabinet Secretary for Health in the Scottish Government, obviously it was something I took an interest in as well, because it was one of these areas where not a lot of people know about it. And the fact that I knew about it through Archie, I was able to tell officials in the health department and various other people that post-polio syndrome is an issue that we needed to help address.
Thank you. 120,000 people in the UK, many thousands in Scotland, possibly 40
6,000, I think.
6,500.
Yeah.
And 40 million worldwide.
Yeah.
Why do you think such a condition which affects so many people has somehow escaped the public radar?
Well, I think the media, when they're covering the subject of polio, almost exclusively talk about the near eradication of polio worldwide. And therefore the message that people are getting is that polio is largely solved and no longer going to be a problem, but they don't tell people about post-polio syndrome. And therefore I think we've got quite a job to do to make many more people inside the health service, in social care, and in society generally, much more aware of post-polio syndrome. And that's a job for all of us to do.
And can you give us a few tips on how you possibly could make that happen?
Well, this event tonight's a very good example of it, because here we are in the Scottish Parliament, we've got 129 MSPs, Scottish Government ministers are in this building as well. So that's a good example of how we can just use this event to advertise the fact there is such a thing as post-polio syndrome, and we need to do more to help people, particularly with diagnosis and the help arising from that diagnosis when they take ill in later life. There are many other ways. Social media these days is obviously a very powerful weapon, and I think we can make more use of that as well.
I think a particular issue that many of our Scottish members have fed back to us is around isolation.
Yeah.
And it's not just isolation out in rural places, you can be isolated
Absolutely.
in a city like Edinburgh.
Yeah, if you're in a multi-storey flat in the middle of Glasgow, you can be very isolated.
Is there any way we could help isolate people more, do you think? Any way you can suggest we can help?
Well, one area which in other contexts we have a number of befriending services. For example, in Glasgow there's a particular befriending service that's very impressive, where they phone, and it's directed at older people, and they phone them every morning. Now these are unpaid volunteers, but they phone them every morning just to make sure they're okay, they can get up out of their bed, and they ask them if they've got any immediate needs. So some kind of befriending service, I think, would be a good way to help reduce isolation as a problem.
Brilliant, thank you. In fact, this was actually discussed at our AGM in September, where another region of the fellowship is exactly what they do. So they have a buddy system where somebody makes sure that
Right,
so
good.
maybe we could roll it across our Scottish region.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. And is there anything else you'd like to add to our people watching online, and we might have international viewers as well, so if there's anything...
Well, I think the key thing is health services, not just in Scotland or the UK or in Europe, health services across the world have to become A, much more aware of post-polio syndrome, B, we then need to improve diagnosis, and thirdly, once diagnosis has taken place, we need a clear pathway for patients from diagnosis to treatment for the symptoms. So I think that's a top priority for all of us, is awareness, diagnosis and treatment.
Thank you very much, Alex. We really appreciate you hosting today.
Pleasure.
And making it happen, and we're really pleased to be on today. So
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Welcome to Scotland.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
that was Alex Neil. So great talk there. And I was just saying before that, and he sort of highlights what I'm saying. We not only need to get the message out within the UK, but we need to get the message out internationally. I'm hoping now that Archie's on his way. Hi, Archie. Can you just stand up there?
You want me to sit there?
Sorry?
You want me to sit there?
Stand. Hi Archie.
Okay.
Thank you for welcoming us to Scotland, and many congratulations for coming back on the board.
Don't know about that.
Anyway, so we're in Holyrood today. Dramatic, interesting building. Is there anything you tell our members watching about the Scottish Parliament?
About the Parliament? Not really, apart from it's one of the best things that's happened here because it's the difference in the laws, difference in health boards, everything here comes from one place. As everybody knows, I mean, some of the things that's coming out here for people with prescriptions, free prescriptions, that kind of thing, all come from Scottish Parliament. So it's been a bonus to us.
And why do you think it's so important that we're having PPS Day today in Scotland?
Well, it's awareness reasons. As I said, there hasn't been a lot of awareness of polio in Scotland for a long, long while. We've tried for years now, and it's another way of advancing the cause, basically, opposed polio, letting people know, hopefully getting out there.
And what do you think realistically we want to achieve in terms of today and PPS general awareness over the next 2 years moving forward?
Well, I hope there's going to be quite a lot because the next time, the next one, I'm not sure who it's going to be, but post polio day has been it's added to the information getting out to people. The information is a biggie, and this, if it gets publicised properly, will give us all we need.
Is there anything else you want to add, Archie?
Just welcome and hope everybody has a good time.
Thank you very much. Just in case anybody doesn't know, Archie Leyden has come back on the Scottish board, but he's regional chair of the Scottish region.
Right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Really exciting. We're just going to let Pat Leyden, Archie's wife now, to say a few words with us. I'm going to echo some of the questions I asked Archie because they're kind of cross, but do you want to just tell us about how you and Archie met first?
Oh my God. I met Archie over 40 years ago at the British Polio Games, the outdoor games in the swimming gardens. And Archie and Captain said, you mustn't talk to the Scottish boys because they're bad. So then I didn't meet him again then till 12 years ago at the British Polio Games indoor sports. And then Archie said, give me his number. And he said, I know you. And I said, I don't know you. Gave me his number and said, ring me, which I didn't do. You don't do that, do you? And then the following year, he gave me his number again. He said, give me your number.
So
and that's
persistent.
how we met. Yeah, funny, isn't it? People
So
like
this is
that.
just a great example of some of the love stories that have happened at particularly indoor games, I would suggest. Yeah. So, sorry?
You get so good at this.
Thank you. Yeah, so...
Edit that bit out.
Exactly. So, can you tell us something about the Scottish Parliament, why it's so particularly important to the Scottish region? How it's helped?
The Scottish Parliament is invaluable, and I am a bit disappointed that there's not more ministers here tonight, because Alec Neil is already a friend of ours. But I would have liked to see some from the Liberal, some from the Greens and the Democrats. I would have liked Labour as well, just one from each party, because I am very interested in the orthotic side, and also it's took a while for them to recognise post-polio syndrome. It's taken years.
I totally agree with you. I do think post-polio syndromes and the issues around it are cross-party.
They don't recognise it.
And
Some
we need
do.
we need to ensure that everybody from every party understands that it's not a party political issue.
The MSP, the SNP do. because we've pushed it.
But we need to bang the drum because we can't. So I agree with you totally. Why do you think it's important that we are here today in Scotland Thursday?
Well, if personally, I think it's very important, but the person you're actually speaking to, that minister, he does know about the difficulties we are having because we've already bombarded him with all these questions, and we had a conference about 5 years ago regarding, it was an SPPN conference regarding all different things, and all these people did visit at this conference, asked all these questions with physios, OTs, but nothing happened after it.
Is there anything else you want to add, Pat?
Pardon?
Is there anything else you want to add?
I think, personally, I think all the ministers should be sourced or sent an email to say, this is your constituents and what are you doing for them in various ways with post-polio.
What I might ask is I'll ask Alex if he could do it through his emails, and then if it's coming from MSP, it might have more impact. But thank you.
You're welcome.
Brilliant.
Anybody else?
Next,
What about Fisher?
yes.
I don't
So yes, as you can see, we have all sorts of different people here, and the experience of PPS is very different. And as you're all aware, the problem with diagnosing PPS is I'm going to start again. It is a diagnosis by elimination, so you can't just do a blood test or just say this person has PPS. Now, I'm really excited to have Andy with us. Do you want to stand over there, Andy?
On the spot.
Yeah, I'm just going to find my right
So
card.
where do you want me to look? Look at the
Look at
sky.
me.
Or look at you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, I know I'm not that pretty, so it's all right. But it's only for a little while.
I don't know. That worse.
For those of you who don't know Andy, he's recently been elected to the board as a new trustee back in September.
Yes.
And I remember when we first discussed the possibility of him coming on the board when we came up for the roadshow in Chester.
In Chester, yeah.
Yeah, and he said, can I be part of the board? And Ted said, of course you can. So that was excellent. And he...
Yeah, just from that almost casual conversation.
Exactly.
Here I am.
Yeah.
I was really humbled to receive so many votes because although I've been a member for over 57 years, I do still a lot of people that I don't know, obviously, around the country. So they've entrusted the vote in me, and I'm delighted.
Can you, because obviously you're involved with the branch and region, so can you tell us more about your role within the branch and region as well?
Yeah, I've been a member of the Merseyside branch for 57 years. I'm the actual branch treasurer. I've been the treasurer for nearly 10 years now. And I've also become the Northwest Regional Secretary. So I'm quite heavily involved at the grassroots level.
So you have a number of fellowships hats.
Yes, I've got 3 hats now, 3 formal hats, which I'm delighted to be involved and contribute to the fellowship, which has given me so much over the years. It's just a little way of reciprocating it back again. Well, hopefully that's the intention anyway.
Can you tell us something about what you'd like to achieve while being a trustee of the fellowship?
Well, and I realise, like every charity, there's a lot of financial difficulties and that. But because I'm from the grassroots, my intention is really to do as much as possible for the membership while maintaining, a level of financial stability within the fellowship, and hopefully promoting the fellowship as much as I can, which is one of the main reasons I'm here now. And I've got the tie to prove it now as well.
So, the indoor games, I know you're a regular visitor to indoor games.
Yeah.
As a competitor, can you tell us about your involvement with the games and why the games are so important?
Well, I've finished in the top 4 of the drafts for the last 10 years. But as you may or may not be aware, Crippen, we used to have 5 national events in the fellowship, and the indoor games is the only one left. We used to have swimming galas and that, and so for me it's an opportunity to meet up with old friends as well as having the competitive edge, which you do get in drafts, you might be surprised to know. But it's more as much about meeting up with old friends and meeting yourselves and keeping in touch and that. Obviously it's, the games are at a cost, and I'm aware of that. But I think at the roadshow you will have gathered that a lot of members want to keep the games going for as long as possible. And we enjoy going to Leicester, and it's a lovely hotel where we go.
Well, central office enjoys coming to Leicester as well.
Yeah,
So,
no. Yeah.
It's a great chance for us to meet the membership as well.
Yeah, and my wife goes as well with me, and so she's got a chance to have met Shirley and Dawn and everybody, so yourself and of course Ted and whatever. So.
You must have been a regular read of the bulletin. Is there anything you'd like to say about the bulletin? Any comments, feedback?
Well, yeah, the bulletins is absolutely made really significant strides as improvements. And I like the new format. It's got the glossy cover, so it gives it that little bit of high profile. But the actual reading the pages and that is quite easy, and the content is excellent, I think. And it's an excellent form of communication. And I certainly, for one, don't mind having it in digital, if that's going to save costs. It won't be quite the same, but nevertheless, you won't see so many colour photographs of me, will you? I featured twice in this one.
You've got a double whammy this time.
I've got a double whammy, yeah.
Plus you had the last one with the indoor games themselves, weren't you?
Oh yeah, of course, I forgot about that.
So two issues in a row, wasn't it? So, excellent. It's good to hear that you love the village, because it's something I work on quite a lot.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's good. And there's lots of really positive features in it. I like the stories, my stories, and just the news, what's going on, and keeps you abreast of the PPS and the work at the International Rotary, things like that. And I'm interested in that, I do talks with the Rotary as well on polio and the people living with the late effects of polio, the PPS as we call it now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to speak to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Triple. Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, God bless.
Okay, all right.
Was that
Bye,
okay?
as I say.
Was that okay?
We're wanting to start. Are you doing the last one with Graham? Yeah.
Is that right?
There's a camera on you.
Hi, Graham.
Hello.
I'm just going to get myself organised. Sorry, 1 second.
What you want to speak to?
Sorry, guys. I can't find the right card now. Suddenly.
Where do you want
There
it?
you go. Hi. This is Dr. Graham Cope. He's a medical scientist, married to Gwenda, who you heard from earlier. Thank you very much for doing a talk today, Graham.
Until Gwenda joined the fellowship. So I do some medical writing. So I just looked at the research, to the background, the modern research, something that people are working on at the moment. And so I wrote a report, which I found very enlightening. And I've noticed that Gwenda's disability is increasing slowly, but there are noticeable changes. And that's really where I'm becoming more interested in engaging with a fellowship, because I can see that there are lots of people who don't have the support that they need in order to help with their disabilities.
Why do you think it's important to have a day like PPS Day each day? Also, can you tell us a bit about your work with Cope Communications as well?
Okay, I think that the general awareness of PPS amongst primary care, that's GPs, physiotherapists, is inadequate, and I think we need to get the message across that this is a new syndrome. that there are lots of people out there, and it's not just people in the UK, it's people worldwide who have been affected by polio, and I think that they need attention as well. Cope Communications is just a vehicle for my writing and for my public speaking. I do speaking about a variety of medical topics and history as well, which is my private interest.
Everyone's talking about the new film Breed.
Yeah.
I know we were together at filming a couple of weeks ago. For those of you who have not seen it, without giving too many spoilers away, what do you think was inspiring?
I thought it was very good. I thought that the producer, Cavendish, who obviously had lived through his father's illness, was obviously very personally involved and portrayed that in the film. And I thought the director, Serkis, also had a kind of a personal interest. And that showed in the emotive topics that they covered. So I thought it was a very good film.
Thank you very much, Graham. So we will be seeing Graham later when he does his presentation. So I'm not going to ask him to spill any beans on that just yet. We'll let it unfold naturally. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're going to kick off formal proceedings now. So I will be leaving. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Can you just go and stand at the lectern again for me for a minute?
Oh my arms.
So on the step. David. It will be. Yes, it is.
Sorry? Oh, okay, right. Well, can you take the chair? Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start just a few minutes early. There are some scones and shortbread left if you wish to grab some before we start. Where's Gwenda? Where's Gwenda? Where's she gone to? Yeah, so I can just say who you are, okay? Just there's people still sitting. A couple there looking for somewhere to sit. Trouble is, if you some of them fall over. It happened, funny enough, it happened in Cardiff. There's Ted. Graham's back. Okay. Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome, and thank you all very, very much for coming along. We have quite a large crowd here. It's very, very good to see you. And on behalf of the trustees, my name's David Mitchell, and I'm proud to be the current national chairman and also a director of the European Polio Union, and that's going to help the fellowship greatly because we have 8 trustees, they have 8 trustees, and the European Polio Union now has 29 countries signed up. We even extend as far as Georgia, and so we're looking forward to helping not just with the eradication of polio, but why we're mainly here tonight to talk about post-polio syndrome. As you know, I used to run a hotel when I was a young man, about 500 yards away from here, so it's nice to be back. Thank you for inviting us to your country, and it is a marvellous country. I've been to all 7 cities that are in Scotland and many, many other places, and we hope that your tourist season has been very good and that next year will be even better. The young lady stood by my side is Gwenda Cope. Gwenda is a trustee and she is also the National Vice Chairman and already a great support. As I said, we're 8 trustees. We also have with us young Andy Gilliland, who's very, very well known in polio circles. Andy comes from Liverpool. He's a chum of Pat Layden. And we also have your regional chairman, Archie, and Archie has come back onto the board as a trustee. The other trustees are from Yorkshire, they're from Kent, they're from central London and from Wimbledon, and we are all polios, so we know what you've been through, we know what you're going through, and of course the job of the fellowship is to make sure that all medical people, carers and experts know all about post-polio syndrome. So once again, thank you for inviting us here. A couple of parish notices. There isn't a fire drill planned, and the lady says that if there is a fire, then it isn't a bell or a siren, it is a verbal announcement over the tannoy. Can we remind you to switch off your mobile phones, please? And you will notice that John from Beyond PR has taken a lot of photographs. Young Andy is there with the live streaming, so if you do not wish to be photographed or filmed, we'll have to let you know. Georgina and Mary Guild have already contacted their agents and they're quite happy for them to appear. Okay, so can we now welcome the gentleman who has sponsored us. He's a member of the Scottish Parliament for Airdrie and Shotts. He's a good friend of Archie and Pat, Mr. Alex Neil, member of the Scottish Parliament.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Can I first of all welcome everybody to the Scottish Parliament. I know many of you, particularly from down south, maybe this is the first time you've been in the Parliament, so I hope you like it. It was built, we entered this place in 2004, and since then we've had something like 3 million visitors through the Parliament. It was built by a guy called Enrique Morales from Barcelona, who unfortunately died halfway through the project, and his wife completed it. But some interesting things about the Parliament you might want to know. Firstly, that for the last 1,000 years on this site in Edinburgh, there has been alcohol produced, usually beer, sometimes whiskey, and of course it's now got a changed role with MSPs in here, because instead of producing it, we just drink it in this place. Secondly, I'll tell you a historic fact that many people don't believe. The Parliament is built in 4 towers. There's a media tower, a ministerial tower, a members' tower, and a committee tower. And there's also Queensberry House, which you can see the frontage of there. It's one of the reasons why the Parliament costs so much, because Queensberry House required a lot of money spent on it to make it habitable again. And of course, Queensberry House is about 500 years old, and it used to be the residence of the Marquis of Queensberry. And of course, you'll know about Queensberry rules, and it was one of those marquises who concocted those rules. But there is a true story that in 1707, when the Marquis left here to go up to the top of the Royal Mile, to the old Parliament building, to sign the Act of Union between Scotland and England. And he took his entire household with him. And they left an 11-year-old boy, you'll be able to see it later in there, at the fireplace, it's still there, and he was to look after the pig and the roast and the spit, which was to be for the feast, once the Marquis and his household came back down from signing the Act of Union in the old Parliament. But unbeknown to many people at the time, apart from the Marquis had a 20-year-old son who since birth had lived in the attic because of what today we would call severe learning difficulties. But he realised the house was empty, and he managed to get out of the attic. And when the Marquis and his household came back from signing the Act of Union, the 11-year-old boy was roasting on the spit. And that's a true story. So I'm sure you'll all want to see where the spit was. A late friend of mine, a guy called Robin Hardy, who made the film The Wicker Man, when I told him that story, said he wanted to make a film about it, but unfortunately he passed away earlier this year and never got the opportunity, but I'm sure it would have made a good film. But and this is called the garden lobby, and this is the grand staircase leading up to the chamber. So hopefully you'll get a chance, if not tonight, at some other point, to have a full tour of the building. Can I particularly extend a welcome to all those people who have travelled far and wide to be here tonight, and in particular from all those people or friends from down south. It's nice to see you up here in Edinburgh, and I know you've been to the UK Parliament, to the Cardiff Parliament. I think you've been to Stormont as well, to preach and spread the awareness about post-polio syndrome. I got to know about post-polio syndrome through my good friend Archie Layden and Pat, his good lady, who's also a friend of mine. As well as being friends, they're constituents of mine. And Archie came to see me many years ago when he was setting up a fundraising shop in Coatbridge, which is adjacent to my constituency of Airdrie, which John Smith used to represent in the House of Commons. And I hadn't heard of post-polio syndrome until Archie came to see me in my constituency office. And when I became Health Secretary in 2012 in the Scottish Government, one of the things I tried to do was to make our officials and as many people as possible aware of post-polio syndrome. I did an interview earlier with Crippen, and one of his questions was, how do we spread the word and spread knowledge of and awareness of post-polio syndrome? And I think, quite frankly, events like this help, social media helps, but there is no substitute for actually just talking to people about it and letting them know about it. I think one of the challenges we've got is that right across the world, in terms of media coverage, any reference to polio in news bulletins or whatever, and indeed I was reading I think it was the Economist magazine last week, and one of its stories was about how we have nearly, almost totally eradicated polio from the globe. Still some countries with incidents of polio, but by and large we're getting very near to eradication. Now that's a good news story. I think everybody in here will be delighted at the progress made, and organisations like the Gates Foundation in Africa have done wonderful work along with UN bodies and many others in trying to eliminate polio from the face of the globe. But that's the message that people get. It's a good news message. They're glad about the message. We all are. But they then don't go on to tell them about the aftermath of having had polio. They don't tell them there's such a thing as post-polio syndrome. They don't tell them that sometimes it doesn't reappear. Those syndrome symptoms don't appear till relatively late in life. They don't tell them about the challenge of GPs not knowing about post-polio syndrome, not being able to diagnose it very easily or very quickly. They don't tell them about, because you don't get diagnoses, you don't get the right treatment as quickly as you should do, and don't get the right support. So I think these are the big challenges facing each and every one of us in here, and all those people, not just people with post-polio syndrome, but there's a moral obligation on all of us to do everything we can to increase awareness of and knowledge about post-polio syndrome. It is not acceptable, given the numbers, that so few people, even in the medical profession, aren't aware of this condition. In Scotland, we've got over 6,000 people who have been diagnosed with post-polio syndrome. There may be others who haven't been diagnosed and we don't know they've got it. Across the whole of the UK, there are 120,000 people diagnosed with post-polio syndrome. Across Europe, there are 1 million people with PPS. And across the world, there are an estimated 40 million people with post-polio symptoms. So this is not just a Scottish or UK issue or a European issue, it's a global issue. And therefore, I think the more we can do, and David mentioned his involvement in the European Polio Union, the more we can do to spread the message, not just in our own locales, but right across our country and beyond, then the better. And can I tell you, although this being Thursday night, a lot of MSPs are travelling home because they've got surgeries tomorrow morning. I'm disappointed there aren't more of my colleagues here tonight. But one of the things we'll do, if Crippen sends me the recordings that he's taking tonight, I know that it's being streamed. If he sends them to me, I'll make sure that every member of the Scottish Parliament, including every government minister, gets a copy of both the information material as well as the filming that Crippen is doing this evening. Because it's extremely important that we make the legislators, we make the people who are allocating the fundings to the health service and to local authorities and to third sector organisations, it's very important they are all aware of not just the fact that there is such a syndrome, but that we have got to put resource in to dealing with the consequences of it. So I welcome you here tonight. I thank you very much indeed for coming to the Scottish Parliament, and I hope this will be the first of many visits for those people who are here for the first time. And can I say that although there aren't many MSPs here tonight, I think probably I'm the only one as far as I can see, do not be too depressed by that, because I'll make damn sure they get to know about it. Thank you.
Now you can tell why that gentleman is a successful politician. No notes at all. Can we now welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Graham Cope. Graham will tell you who he is, but of course his surname may give you a clue. He is the husband of our National Vice Chairman, and he's very kindly come to talk to you today.
Well, thanks very much. By way of an introduction, I'm a medical scientist. I've been studying smoking and alcohol-related diseases all my career, and lately I've kind of been turning my hand to some medical writing. Now, my wife Gwenda, we've been married 30-odd years, and over the last few years I've been noticing some decline in her physical abilities, and she developed polio as a very young child, which affected one of her legs, and her mobility was compromised. But the changes came home to me one sunny afternoon when we were enjoying the weather in the garden with some friends, and Gwenda was walking towards us with a tray laden with goodies, and she fell on the lawn. So we had scones and cake and broken crockery all over the place, which itself was upsetting, but it certainly brought home to me the deterioration that she'd undertaken. Now, the polio virus, poliomyelitis, gets into the body through the nose and through the mouth, and gets through the lining into the bloodstream. And in the vast majority of cases, it just causes a flu-like symptom, which in itself is quite serious, but there's no lasting effect. But in a majority of cases, the virus will get into the central nervous system and attack the individual nerves or neurons. When it's attacked, these nerves die, and when the nerves are no longer active, then the muscles can no longer work, and this is what causes the paralysis. Now, many people, particularly very young children, infantile paralysis as it was called then, would contract the polio and suffer this paralysis and would have to spend a long period of time in hospital, weeks and months undergoing physiotherapy and perhaps surgery if their limbs were affected. If their lungs and their chest muscles were affected, they had to spend a long time on respirators, and at that stage sometimes they were called the iron lung. After obviously a long period, some of these people were well enough to leave hospital and go home and try to live a relatively normal life, making the best that they could with their limited mobilities. And this is only possible because the body can undertake some adaptations. Because the nerves are damaged, the central nervous system will grow new nerves. These come out of what's called axonal sprouts, which is an image to conjure with. But these sprouts, they produce new nerves that get into the weakened muscles, trying to increase their strength, but also increasing the strength of the secondary muscles. So this increases a certain amount of mobility. And, for example, my wife was able to play sport. She and I used to play badminton and squash. She never beat me, but at least she tried. She wasn't the fastest runner I ever saw, but she got by. But it's the adaptations, these axonal sprouts, these new nerves, and the secondary muscles are not as robust as the originals. And so over a period of 50, 60, 70 years, these axonal sprouts are declining in their activity. And this is what post-polio syndrome is. It's a decline in the new nerves adaptations. Now, if the limbs were lower limbs, it was particularly the legs that were affected. If the lower limbs were affected, then the person's walking would be abnormal. And this abnormal gait would put undue pressure and stresses on the ankles, the knees, the hips, and the spine. And obviously these changes would undergo over a period of years cause long-term problems. And this is part of the post-polio syndrome, the pain that comes from the wearing out of the limbs. Now, not only is there a decline in the physical aspects, the muscle activities, but there's also a change in the psychology, because many of these people thought that their deformities had plateaued, that they'd kind of got over the worst that they could be, and they'd learned to live with these adaptations. But now they can see that they're declining, and sometimes declining very quickly. And this brings back many of the memories that they suffered and witnessed when they were young children. And it's this depression that goes with the physical decline that's obviously as important. Now, if many of these people had their chest muscles affected early on, and these are now declining with the syndrome, they will have trouble with breathing. And along with their reduced mobility, breathlessness will reduce their mobility even more. If their throat muscles are affected, then their swallowing will now be affected. And this can have obviously impact on eating, drinking, and even medication can become a problem, which is very distressing in older people. But that's not to say that these syndrome cannot be helped. If these symptoms can be found early, then people can receive physiotherapy and other assistance with their walking or their breathing, where they can overcome these problems. So what we really need to do is to increase the awareness, as already been said. And research has shown that the awareness of PPS amongst GPs, physiotherapists, occupational therapists and the like is very inadequate. And so it needs to be part of the training process that the younger medics are going through. So what these advice should be is to have appropriate physiotherapy. I mean, Gwenda has a good contact with her rehabilitation centre. They help her with the orthotics for her shoes, help with understanding with how walking sticks and the like. And so they can be provided with aids. But we know that these rehabilitation centres have rather been starved of resources. So we call on people to increase the money that goes towards these helpful people. Now, other things that can be done, I mean, people can be advised to do low-level exercise, but not too much to tire them out. I mean, for example, swimming, which is non-weight-bearing, can be very good. Pilates, my wife Gwenda does Pilates, which is a muscle-strengthening regime, which is certainly helping her. And, I mean, we also very recently bought Gwenda an electric bicycle. She'd found that ordinary cycling was getting increasingly difficult, and this e-bike has become a real revelation. I mean, we cycle both in this country and abroad, and really she puts me to shame when she flies past me on the hills, because these are so good. One thing that I think that's also important is that the number of people with PPS in Britain is about the same number of people with Parkinson's disease, and even more than people with multiple sclerosis. And yet the awareness of PPS is much lower than that. And this is one thing that we need to address. It's the increased recognition that it's the point of today's meeting. I would like to see the acronym PPS as well known in the medical profession and amongst the general public as the likes of MS or TB. And hopefully this will bring greater awareness to people who are suffering this post-polio syndrome to live a much better life in the future. I thank you.
Before we invite our next guest speaker, do you have any questions of Dr. Cope at all? Okay, but we will be here to... Oh, there's a young lady there.
This lady said that she'd been advised that she shouldn't be taking painkillers because of tendinitis, and asked whether this would result in overuse of her tendons. Well, I think that if you can reduce the pain, but be aware that you shouldn't overdo it, because you know these secondary muscles and these nerves do become tired very quickly, and so if you overdo it, you're going to put more strain and reduce this the speed of this decline. So, I mean, I would advise you to use the painkillers certainly, but okay.
Anybody else? But Graham, as I say, will all be available for any questions.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I did when I first became aware of the syndrome was to write this report for a nursing journal, and there are some copies on the table. But if they've all gone and you want one, then Crippen will send you one either through the post or by email or whichever system you require. Okay.
We're going to introduce our next speaker. Scott is on hand to do the sound system for you. So if you'd like to come forward, and then whilst Scott is arranging, we're going to have a quick commercial break. A week ago on Monday, a few of us were very, very privileged to go to a film premiere in the West End of London at no cost. Don't worry, we're not spending money. And that film was called Breathe. Now, it is on national release. Would you put your hand up, anybody, if you've seen it? Right, okay. An absolutely marvellous film, a wonderful film, a quite amazing film, very emotional, educational, and above all, interesting. The star of the film, the producer, and the director were all there to answer questions. And it is basically a film about polio. A very brave man called Robin Cavendish, who survived the longest of anybody on a respirator, and Graham mentioned respirators and iron lungs earlier. And it's an uplifting film, and as one of our ambassadors, Colin Powell, said, he asked one of the questions, very, very emotional. He said, I'm well over 70. He said, I had polio as a child, and I never thought I would see an international film about the life of a polio survivor. Young Andrew Garfield was there, who's quite a newsworthy young star, and he's being tipped for an Oscar nomination, and in fact the film is being tipped. So if you do get a chance to see it, then you will see an absolutely marvellous, marvellous production. Right. You can hear me, I'm sure. Our next speaker is Helen McLean, and she's from the Scottish Post-Polio Network.
Jessica. Right. Many people think polio is something from the dim and distant past, and that because it has been virtually eradicated, that the problem no longer exists. Actually, it is still a problem in parts of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. But here in the UK, in Scotland, well, it's gone, hasn't it? Yes, but that doesn't mean that polio is not still a problem for the people who contacted it years ago, survived it, and are now growing old with it. As Graham has so eloquently described, the emergence of post-polio syndrome, PPS for short, has become another threat to the health of polio survivors. One of the worst aspects of PPS has been the difficulty in getting it recognised, and therefore the difficulty in getting a diagnosis. The Scottish Post-Polio Network, SPPN, was founded in 1998 by a group of passionate and committed people who were frustrated with the lack of recognition about the very existence of post-polio syndrome and the virtually non-existent facilities available for sufferers. Back in the day, even the BPF found it difficult to understand and accept that post-polio syndrome was a real problem and not just the complaints of an ageing membership. But it's not just a problem for polio survivors and their families. It is also a problem for our society, as more and more polio survivors develop PPS and therefore require more support from health and social care services in Scotland. If we examine the Scottish context, whilst there is no such thing as a typical polio survivor, we can visualise one, thanks to a member survey that had been conducted in recent years. Their average age is 69, and by ratio of 2:1 is likely to be female and live in any or all parts of Scotland. For a large number, polio seemed to have affected the lower limbs, causing withering, shortening, and paralysis. Some people only appeared to be affected in the upper body. It is now known that polio indeed affected all parts of the body, but did not necessarily show that at the time. But now polio survivors are experiencing weakness, muscle wasting, and pain in parts of the body that they did not realise had been affected by the virus. Almost a third of polio survivors will use calipers, and about a half will now need to rely on walking aids or a power chair or a scooter to get around. About 50% have been diagnosed with PPS, most of them after lengthy, exhausting, and protracted battle. A third of them have reported suffering from depression, and perhaps that has been aggravated by the frustration of not being listened to or have found very little support or advice from the medical profession. The problem facing polio survivors are many, and those are problem areas on which SPPN has focused attention since its inception. So how many people are affected? In 2011, it was acknowledged there had been around 10,200 polio survivors in Scotland alone, and that some 60% of them would be suffering from post-polio syndrome. That's some 6,000 people, who after a lifetime of managing the results of the original polio now face new and additional difficulties, and it is anticipated that will require services for the next 40 years. These new difficulties range from extreme fatigue, muscle and joint pain, new muscle wastage, respiratory problems, decreased mobility, cold intolerance, and increased stress and anxiety about the future. There is no cure for post-polio syndrome, but early diagnosis helps identify what is required to manage the condition within a programme of care, support, aids, and pain medication, and learning to pace oneself. This is a completely new phenomenon for polio survivors who have worked hard to remain independent and to push through pain and the original effects of the polio and led worthwhile and productive lives. When SPPN started to campaign, it found an ally here. And SPPN want to acknowledge and give heartfelt thanks to the late Margot MacDonald, MSP. Margot became a patron of SPPN and used all her passion, skills, and political creativity to bring SPPN and PPS into the heart of the government. When we lost Margot, we lost a great friend, a loyal ally, and a fierce campaigner. SPPN still need a patron like her from within the Parliament. Volunteers, please speak to George afterwards, our new chairperson. I'm just sorry there's not more MSPs here tonight, but Alec, I'm glad you're going to pass this on. Margot helped us achieve so much, first by initiating a petition in Parliament to raise awareness of PPS, and then along with SPPN created the SMASAC report. In 2011, SMASAC is short for Scottish Medical and Scientific Advisory Committee. The report was entitled Post-Polio Syndrome and the Late Effects of Polio. It was an incredible, powerful and detailed assessment of the needs of polio survivors who were suffering from the late effects of polio and PPS. It recognised that PPS was very real and that sufferers needed to be able to access speedy, sympathetic assessment and have safe, effective pathways to care. The report was seen then and is recognised now across the world as an exemplar in the PPS arena of how people working alongside Parliament and NHS boards can start to bring about change. SMASAC identified the need for awareness raising about post-polio syndrome among neurological and orthotic services within primary care and amongst polio survivors themselves. What is it? How is it diagnosed? And how best can it be managed? It also examined the assessment of patients' needs and management of care pathways and the provision of orthotics and other aids. So what happened after the SMASAC report? How far and how well have these recommendations been implemented since 2011? Well, one of the difficulties is that there has never been a review or an evaluation of how well SMASAC recommendations have been implemented. The report has now been archived, similar to the way people who contacted polio have been consigned to the medical history books. But there are new initiatives in place to move forward, and we'll examine them shortly. After SMASAC, SPPN continued its role as a campaigning organisation, gathering evidence and presenting this to the appropriate bodies and agencies. This evidence indicated that the implementation of SMASAC recommendations across Scotland had been patchy and inconsistent. In terms of awareness raising, the voluntary sector, including SPPN and BPF, are playing a leading role. Production of leaflets and guidance for survivors and the general public, the distribution of various papers to practitioners, such as the SMASAC report itself and the Queensland Manual, and the BPF Guide to Practitioners. SPPN also compiled a list of consultants in Scotland who had knowledge of polio and an interest in PPS. But as those consultants retire, it is hard to find replacements. The medical profession as a whole needs to recognise and understand PPS. The latest SPPN leaflet, Are You a Polio Survivor?, has been available to all medical practices via the Scottish NHS distribution system, and also electronically adapted and circulated to all community pharmacists in Scotland by Community Pharmacy Scotland. This enables pharmacies to download, print off and hand to individuals as opposed to keeping large stocks of leaflets on display. A great example of how modern technology can help. All the evidence suggests there is still a huge task in raising awareness, and this is of particular importance when we talk about an access to diagnosis. The evidence gathered by SPPN suggests that this varies enormously across Scotland. If a GP, who is your first port of call, has little or no knowledge of PPS, then you have a problem. If she or he can't make the link between someone who had polio now presenting with a range of symptoms which mirror other diseases and ailments, or may be attributed to the ageing process, then post-polio syndrome can be missed completely. If a GP makes a referral to a neurologist, but the neurologist has no awareness of PPS, then again, there is no guarantee that this will result in the diagnosis of PPS. There are no specialist diagnostic centres for PPS in Scotland, only 3 in the UK. The Lane Fox unit at St Thomas Hospital in London is willing to accept referrals from Scotland, and on a positive note, the First Minister has made it clear that funding would be available to enable Scottish polio survivors who are suspected of having PPS to attend the Lane Fox unit for diagnosis and attend their rehabilitation programme. However, when patients seek to visit the Lane Fox, many individual health boards claim there is no need to send people. There is a diagnostic service and a protocol in Scotland are significant. This is contrary to what many polio survivors are experiencing in their own areas. A review of diagnostic services across Scotland would of course either confirm or refute this assertion. This Mass Act requirement for a comprehensive assessment of patient needs so as to establish clear clinical pathways and ensure access to the most appropriate range of services, including neurology, pain management, orthotics and rehabilitation, or a combination of all of them, which are person-centred, safe and effective, would seem to be such a goal waiting fulfilment. We are still a long way off having a consistently applied practice across Scotland. A huge area of concern which affects polio survivors, whether they have PPS or not, is that of orthotics and other aids. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the world of orthotics, in terms of polio survivors, this includes calipers, braces, specially made shoes, sticks, crutches, wheelchairs, scooters, hoists, and a variety of home adaptations. Stories from members across Scotland presenting examples of poor orthotic service are too prevalent for them to be categorised as one-off. Access to good quality, well-fitting orthotics should never be dependent on whether you have the money to buy them privately. Calipers which collapse, no longer fit or give support, built up and adapted shoes which do not fit properly. All these impact adversely on mobility and quality of life and are not cost-effective. They cause great emotional distress to people, desperate to remain independent and as mobile as possible. The problem with orthotics are found all over Scotland, but we are pleased to acknowledge that Lothian Health Board's willingness to review its service and to make such needed improvements. It is their intention to make the required improvements from which other health boards may learn and benefit. A meeting in November will bring together medical clinicians, orthotists, technical staff, and polio survivors to examine the specific needs of post-polio patients. The area of social care is, of course, a massive issue with an ageing population. Where long-term condition complicates the problem of getting older, the polio survivors and those suffering from PPS in particular, their needs may well be more complex than most other people in an ageing population. The requirement, for example, of a specialised nurse for polio survivors and sufferers of PPS could be just as great as the need for specialist MS and Parkinson's nurses or colorectal and breast care nurses for sufferers of cancer. Recent developments are promising, and we look forward to improvements in several of the areas we have identified. In October 2016, representatives of SPPN and BPF Edinburgh branch attended the NHS Lothian annual report meeting attended by Health Minister Shona Robinson and chaired by Jim Crombie, the Assistant Chief Executive of NHS Lothian. A heartfelt presentation seeking help for polio survivors was made, and SPPN were delighted with the positive responses. Paul Gray, the Director of General Health and Social Care with the Scottish Government and Chief Executive of NHS Scotland, requested further meetings with representatives of SPPN to discuss matters further. Of crucial importance, Professor Jason Leach, the National Clinical Director, Healthcare Quality and Strategy, has written to NHS Board, medical directors, and copied it to NHS chief executives. In his letter, he asked them to raise awareness in neurology and orthotic services of the needs of people living with post-polio syndrome, to consider care pathways for people with PPS to ensure that they are able to access a suitable range of services and ensure that there is appropriate provision of orthotic services for people living with PPS. In his letter, Professor Leach reiterated the ongoing requirements, assessment to be a further 40 years for services required for polio survivors suffering from the late effects of polio and PPS. He notes the belief held by SPPN that because of the relatively small numbers of people, some 6,000 living with PPS, they are considered a low priority, and that this has led to the perceived lack of knowledge among healthcare professionals. The most important part of Professor Leach's letter is perhaps the paragraph headed action. I will take the liberty of quoting directly from the letter. Although this is a relatively small group of patients, they have very specific needs, and their views currently is that these needs are not being met. I would appreciate your help in ensuring that people with PPS have appropriate access to high-quality services which are essential to maintain their overall health and well-being. And all I can add to that is Amen. For the future, SPPN will continue to ensure its connections to the members of this Parliament and to all other key players are maintained and further developed. There have definitely been improvements and developments in some parts of Scotland and in some of the areas covered by SMASAC since 2011. There have been many positives, and we look forward to the future. There is still a lot of progress to be made, and this has to be done in partnership. The voluntary sector can only do so much. There needs to be a strong lead and leverage from this building and through all the component parts of the health and social care system. Polio is not interested in political boundaries, and polio survivors want only for their condition to be taken seriously and for the goal of a personalised, effective and safe care pathway for all to be achieved for them as well. So in summary, these are the tasks which still must be addressed by SPPN and other partners present to ensure that those suffering from PPS get the service and the facilities they need for a safe and, where possible, an independent and fulfilled life. Continue raising awareness, continue to campaign in respect of better pathways and services and provision of improved orthotic services across Scotland. Promote the use of specialised nurses for people with PPS. Clarify the process whereby PPS patients can be referred to Lane Fox unit when services are not provided here in Scotland. SPPN will continue to contribute to NHS Lothian, Patient Opinion Care, the Alliance, Strathclyde National Centre for Prosthetics and Orthotics, and the Community Pharmacy Scotland, and to work with our sister organisations to make best use of resources and expertise, both in the UK and worldwide, through our membership of EPU, the European Polio Union. Finally, a heartfelt plea from a polio survivor who has PPS. Polio may be nearing eradication, but polio survivors are still here. In spite of suffering from polio, we have worked as hard as we could to contribute to society and remain independent. Sadly, many of us are now finding we are disabled for the second time, but now with very little recognition of our new condition. We don't ask for anything more than other people with long-term conditions, but we still seem to be fighting to get what we need. As our condition deteriorates, must we still campaigning year on year? Must we beg for services, support and acceptance that we require? Well, SPPN hopes not. We have already described the positive progress already made and about to be made. We now look forward to resolving the remaining issues and removing the barriers, thereby facilitating real progress in meeting the needs of those suffering from PPS. It can't be done without your help. Thank you.
I'd like to say something to everybody here. We've heard the speakers talk about the need for the recognition. We've heard the speakers talk about the need for awareness and support. I would like to speak from my position as somebody who has polio, post-polio syndrome, and other conditions related to it. I wasn't on your list for speakers, and I'm not going to be as long as you, Helena. What do we want and when? We heard about the speakers saying the health and social care, the professionals, and all the other ones. I'm going a different tack here. I am angry and frustrated. I have polio, post-polio syndrome, osteoporosis in my polio foot, which gives me a lot of pain, and I'm riddled with arthritis in my body, lately in my good knee, my right leg. Over the years, I've gone from being a very confident and independent person to one who's desperately looking for support. I was a member of the East 5 Polio Support Group, which was set up and facilitated by Tara Anderson, the Scottish only part-time employee of the British Polio Fellowship. And yes, David, I'm going to be critical. Tara had, as part of her job, set up and facilitated support groups in East 5, West 5, Strathclyde, and the Highlands, and there were plans for the South of Scotland group. She also completed a massive survey of the Scottish membership with the aim of applying for local lottery funding to secure the project. Tara's role was that of a linchpin, in that she was able to share knowledge, queries, suggestions, and possible solutions between the groups. We passed information on, we learned from other groups, and they learned from us. At the end of 2016, without any warning, the BPF informed Tara by letter that her 3-year contract was going to be terminated early, and actually it was Tara who had to inform the Scottish Regional Council and the polio membership. There had been no consultation with the Scottish Regional Council or the members at all. I think it is hypocrisy by the British Polio Fellowship to talk about the needs of people living with polio and post-polio syndrome, but at the same time having sacked our only support worker in Scotland, who for many, including me, was the lifeline they needed to cope and manage with our condition. The British Polio Fellowship official quote was that, as a result in operational requirements, the fellowship and decreased income, the position of the Development Officer Scotland is no longer needed. No longer needed. They said this without consulting us. There also was no exit strategy or an impact assessment done by British Polio Fellowship. The Scottish Regional Council of the Fellowship was 100% behind Tara's survey and plans to go to the Scottish Lottery for ongoing funding. There was also no need to sack our support worker, because there is plenty of money in Scottish legacies, including the Metcalfe Fund, which actually had contributed 50% towards Tara's post. Sadly enough, management at BPF London headquarters solely control all legacies and funds. Tara had an equivalent colleague called Rachel in Devon, who was the only other UK development officer. She also got the sack with 6 months short of her contract. Last year, before all this happened, Tara and Rachel had suggested to HQ management to approach the National Lottery for funding to roll out support workers to projects to each of the UK polio fellowships. I think it's 8 regions. As far as I know, nothing was done with this. On the 8th of January, I personally wrote a begging email to the trustees of the British Polio Fellowship, outlining all the positives that had come out of the support group I attended and the other ones. I finished my letter by saying that the project had proved such a success in Scotland that it should be expanded to all other regions in the UK. Sadly enough, it fell on deaf ears. Information from the British Polio Fellowship states there are now 120,000 people living with polio in the UK. The good thing coming out of mass vaccination of babies is that polio is on the way out in most of the world. The reality for us people living with polio and post-polio syndrome is that in 20 years' time, we won't be here anymore. Not many of us will be alive. That's why I'm saying what we need is support now, not in 20 years' time. And Alex, I'm asking the Scottish Government to give us money to employ a part-time development and support worker for probably up to 2 years, with the aim to source Scottish lottery funding for after that. If the Polio Fellowship hadn't pulled the plug, we would have had funding for another at least 3 to possibly 5 years from the lottery, but the plug was pulled. Tara did the groundwork with the All Scottish Members survey, which is now stored somewhere in the British Polio Fellowship headquarters in London. The worker, if we get the money, the worker could be employed by either the Scottish Regional Council or perhaps even the Scottish Post-Polio Network or some other body. But I'm asking, please, I think it was £35,000 for a 20-hour part-time post. It's not that much. Give us 70,000 for 2 years, and there's a hell of a lot of people like me are helped. I was a social worker in the disability field. I was a community worker. I know where I come from. That was a hell of a good project, and a plug was pulled, and it went down that drain. Thank you.
Rudy had the right to come and speak because this is our visit to Scotland to talk to the members in the Scottish region. We heard what you had to say when we came to your AGM in Stirling and also when we had the roadshow in Edinburgh. I'm not going to argue at all with Rudy now because Gwenda and I went and met Tara and Rebecca at Birmingham Airport. I hadn't met Tara before, thought she was an absolutely marvellous person, but of course it is always a matter of extending contracts and if we have the money to do so. Rudy mentioned the lottery and Diane from head office is at the back. Diane does a lot of work with the lottery and we have drawn a blank in many places. I'm not going to go into everything. We don't want to get involved in an argument. I've heard the applause. I know how passionate you are. It did not fall on deaf ears with the trustees. It took up a tremendous amount of our time and the decision was made democratically to curtail the contracts, yes, a little bit early, but because we didn't have any funding. And I agree with Rudy that it would be wonderful to have people like Tara and Rebecca in all the regions. But it's been costed out by our chief executive and our finance manager. And to employ people as good as Tara and Rebecca would cost us approximately £500,000 a year. So don't worry, Rudy. I'm sure that Archie, now he's returned after his annual break, I'm sure Archie will bring forward all the things that you've mentioned. It hasn't fallen on deaf ears at all. Right, I've got to thank a few people, but can I thank Helen for an absolutely marvellous, well-presented and well-researched speech from the heart, packed with a lot of facts and figures. You may be interested, and it's been in the bulletin, a survey was done. 87% of people knew about Parkinson's, 86% about multiple sclerosis, and 85% about motor neurons disease, but only 7% of people knew about post-polio syndrome. So we're on a loser from the start, but the marvellous work you're doing here in Scotland, and we know you're a different country. You're not an independent country, but you are different with different laws and things like that. And again, we value that Archie is back on the board and can keep us up to speed. There is an organisation called Eurodis, which I've found since I've been going over to Europe, and it's to do with rare diseases and it's run by the European Parliament. But believe it or not, polio is not counted as a rare disease. So there's no funding and no research, simply because they've looked at the historic figures and 1 million people had polio, so it can't be rare. But of course, PPS, this is what we're fighting to get that recognised as a rare disease. Can we thank Alex Neil, the member of the Scottish Parliament, our sponsor, and we will supply, I'm sure Crippen will supply him with all the necessary recordings and booklets and pamphlets to send to his fellow members who've gone home to their surgeries. Can we thank Dr. Graham Cope, who stood in at the last minute. Thank most sincerely Helen for her speech. I mentioned one or two of the members of staff, and they'll be here to talk to you afterwards. Ted Hill, our Chief Executive, Diane, Ros, Sarah, and of course young Crippen. Can we thank Claire and the events team here at the Scottish Parliament for their help. Thank Beyond PR for the live streaming, which is being done free of charge, and Andy and Rachel, and John, who is the boss of Beyond, is about with his camera, so if you want any more photos, grab him before he leaves. And can we thank you, the members, and your guests for coming along and giving us such a welcome. Something that is looming very large, as well as PPS, and we are aware of this, it's been discussed at the board. We look to you in Scotland because you seem to be leading the field, but that is the dreadful problem of social care, where carers are given 15 minutes to come in, do everything and leave. And we heard from a carer recently who rang up and said, she Googled us, obviously, and she rang up and said, what is this polio? What is this PPS? And she was looking after a lady who was bedridden. She had to get her out of bed in the hoist and then lower her into her chair. And that took 15 minutes. And she said, legally, I might have to leave the lady dangling in the air and come back at night and let her back down. Things are as desperate as that. So that is a fight that we've got ahead of us. Also, I had a letter saying, tell your doctors and your health authorities, and the bulletin, which you won't have received, I don't think. We brought some copies from the printers, but there's several of them about, so please take one home. A lady has written in to say that her doctor's surgery has been revamped. All the seats are way down near the floor, and none of them have arms. So if she goes, she has to lean against the wall. It's just little things like that which could help us, but make our life very difficult. There's also copies of our book, which has been widely distributed. It was launched a couple of years ago on post-polio syndrome. So please take them back to your branches. Please take them back to your friends and family. And remember that one of the things that we're striving for is publicity. This is why the film Breathe will give a boost. I just had a double-page spread in my local paper. Yes, it's only read by 55,000 people in Lincolnshire, but it's a start. With John's help, we managed to get a feature on Google, and we were actually above Bill Gates, so that's quite something. And also radio interviews in your local area. Local radio and local papers, they don't have many journalists because of the cost. So ring in, and if you see this evening, broken bodies does not mean broken brains. This patronising, I'm not in a wheelchair, I'm lucky, but this patronising thing of talking as if you're not there when you're in your chair, as if you're a foreign body as such. There will be some goodie bags waiting for you as you go out, but as I say, please take all the bulletins and pamphlets. Can I, at this stage, a bit early, wish you all, on behalf of my fellow trustees, the staff, and everybody to do with the British Polio Fellowship, wish you a happy Christmas, a healthy new year, and just remember a final little motto, and this is to all of you, volunteers aren't paid. That's not because they're worthless, but because they're priceless. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for coming.
Must agree, it's been a really informative, slightly exciting evening. A couple of unexpected things happening there. I'm sure you guys took a lot away from today, and I want to thank everybody who joined in to watch and take interest. I'm going to show the bulletin again. It's out this week. Hopefully you should get it by the end of this week or early next week. And just to remind you that the copy deadline for the next issue is 17th November, just a couple of weeks away. So please get your copy in quickly if you want to. But thank you very much. Goodbye.